This is Derek O'Foderinwell with the Medicine Shell, and today I'm going to discuss traditional education in Igbo culture, what our ancestral view on education was, and how education was done prior to colonialism, with a deep dive in what we call the Igbo Apprenticeship system, a method of training and business expansion that has been called the largest wealth incubator in the world today. I was shocked to learn that there is a spiritual origin to the system, and in my research, I realized that the Igbo Apprenticeship system is one of the last remaining elements of the previous system of education developed before the introduction of the method we use today. And I'll explain this towards the end of the video. And most importantly, I'll explain the uniquely African approach to education, which may have benefits to the contemporary system. But before I begin, I have a question. As you're watching the video, I want you to listen closely and answer this. What are the differences between the system I'm describing and the system that we use today? And what methods from the past can be beneficial in educating ourselves as a people today? Hit subscribe if you're new to this channel. I discuss Igbo cosmology, spirituality, and history. So if you know somebody that would be interested in this topic, send them this video. The best way to support this channel is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/themedicineshell. All of my patrons receive access to my research library where I get my information from. It has hundreds of ebooks, articles, and studies, as well as first-hand historical sources on Igbo spirituality, cosmology, culture, and history. We've also started an Odinani study group, which is a live discussion where we give our perspectives and insights on various topics related to life and spirituality. You can join at patreon.com/themedicineshell. And with that being said, let's begin. The most visible and wide-reaching remnant of the traditional education system is what we call today the Igbo Apprenticeship system, but whose actual name is Igbo Odibo. Igbo Odibo is the process by which a successful individual returns to their ancestral community, and often from their extended family, adopts an apprentice who will learn how to own a business in the industry where their teacher found success. For women, Igbo Odibo was done by wealthy families who would adopt a young girl to work with them in their home, while the wealthy family paid for their education, skills training, and finally gives them enough money to start their own venture in whichever skill they acquired in their time with the family. This is today called the house girl system, as the apprentices are known as boy boys or the boy system. Once an individual begins to find success in their business or professional venture, there's an obligation to pass the knowledge down to the next generation, as well as access to the business and relevant trade networks, which is deeply rooted in a history which I'll share towards the end of the video. In both cases, young men and women are chosen due to their reputation as children. When a successful relative is looking for an apprentice for their business, he'll either self-assess or seek advice on the character of individuals. And since life in Igbo culture is communal, there's a wealth of information about the conduct and character of each child that he can then use to make a decision. Once an apprentice of good character is chosen, the family is honored by being given gifts and participates in a group prayer with the community before the process begins. After this point, the new apprentice will follow their boss wherever their business is located, often far from the community that both originate from. While in the custody of their boss, the apprentice will learn new skills necessary to succeed in their set business. Gradually, they're exposed to distribution networks that often comprise of other family members or townsmen stationed in different parts of the world, and how to conduct themselves with customers and within the shop. For the time of serving, the apprentice is not paid and depend on their boss for food, clothing, and shelter. For those who have gone through the system, Igba Odibo is harsh and an often painful process where high workloads are placed on the apprentice and mistakes are punished sternly. The structure of the training varies from boss to boss, if what we can identify as training is practiced at all, outside of hands-on experience and observing the boss at work. In the beginning, an apprentice may be tasked with several marketing errands. The trade apprentice, for example, may be asked to perform Osafia, or the market run, by which they take the products being sold by their boss and leave the shop with them, selling them hand by hand, or physically tracking down potential customers and pitching the shop or product to them. For those serving bosses who don't have accommodation for them, sleeping in the store or workshop is not uncommon. And even after years of struggle, relationships between bosses and apprentices can suddenly end due to a real or perceived mishap. If a boss intends on firing an apprentice, the apprentice's family will try to intervene and plead for forgiveness from the boss, though leverage in doing so is limited by the wealth and status disparity between the two parties, as most apprentices often come from poorer families. In a condition similar to the house girl, there are no set hours for the apprentice, as both of their lives orient around keeping the boss's home or business intact. At the end of the apprenticeship for young men, a celebration is often held back in the boy's parental home. At this celebration, the young man is congratulated for completing their tenure, and is then paid enough money for them to start their own business in a similar trade. And even before this point, Their boss can open a branch elsewhere and make the apprentice the head of the store. In fact, very often a businessman or businesswoman will often seek an apprentice from a family in their ancestral town when they're prepared to open a new branch of their growing business. Often these new branches are awarded to the apprentice as their own, as they have successfully managed to be an apprentice for 4 to 7 years. Very often these new branches are located in new towns and even new countries, which creates a wider distribution network. Once the former apprentice's business starts taking off, they'll return to their ancestral town or family and choose an apprentice of their own, while their former boss will replace their newly independent apprentice, which is them, with another young man from the same clan or town. The tenure of a young woman often ends with her beginning her own business, or beginning university, or being inducted into a trade school. Today, Igba Odibo, or the Igbo Apprenticeship system, is the world's largest wealth incubator, according to some, as it has created more dollar millionaires and brought more people into the middle class than any other program like it anywhere else in the world. Alaba Market, for example, a hub for the Igbo Odibo system, where young men often receive training in sales and distribution of electronics, cycles $4 billion a year worth of business among an estimated 10,000 traders who've gone through this system. These same traders, out of their desire to sell VCD players in the 1990s, began making low-budget, straight-to-disc movies known today as Nollywood, which is today the third largest movie industry in the world by scale of output. And the same desire to sell CDs and CD players, as well as a wide distribution network created by the Igbo Odibo system, led to the rapid expansion of the Nigerian pop music genres in the early 2000s till today, as many of these same traders began record labels, which leveraged large family networks for mass distribution. The apprenticeship system is often said to be the result of the Biafra War, when the state of Biafra separated from the colonial union of Nigeria. A 3-year civil war led to the destruction of major cities in Igbo land. As part of a new country, the Igbo people adapted the Biafra pound as opposed to the Nigerian pound of the time. When the war ended, those who sought to convert their Biafran pounds back into Nigerian currency were met with the 20-pound policy. The 20-pound policy stated that no matter who you were or how much you had in the bank prior to the war, any amount of Biafran pounds will only get you 20 Nigerian pounds. Overnight, the generational wealth of many families disappeared. Another policy, known as the Abandoned Properties Policy, stated that property owned by Igbo people outside of Alibo, or Igbo territory, that was abandoned during the war was officially abandoned forever, and thus shared amongst the non-Igbo natives of that town. And so the popular myth about Igbo Odibo, or the Igbo apprenticeship system, is that it was born out of necessity in order to rebuild after the war. But from studying the cultural history of education and the now lost spiritual component behind it, I've come to find that there's more to the story than meets the eye. The education of a child in traditional Igbo society was purely in the hands of the clan. While outsiders can contribute and do contribute, the process of education and raising a child falls purely within the realm of family. And as you'll see throughout the video, it creates a situation where certain bodies of knowledge are kept within certain families, making certain families specialists in certain crafts. And over time, certain towns and clans grow to monopolize a craft or a body of knowledge. Knowledge acquired through life by a family member is public knowledge for the members of the family, and those whose lives have been elevated by a certain body of knowledge or craft have an obligation to spread that knowledge to the younger ones within the family, or at least those with willing ears. One's teachers are most often their elders, if we're referencing our current understanding of what education means. But in the ancestral worldview, an individual's greatest teacher is their chi, which is exemplified in the saying, Chika Dibia, meaning that knowledge retrieved from within or from your source is greater than the knowledge you can acquire from without, or from a wise man in this example. In the ancestral system, education begins 8 days after birth. In Igbo cosmology, all people enter the world in 2 forms, as Mado, the person, and Mo, which we call spirit today but more closely resembles aura, while embodying attributes of both. This concept is seen in the understanding of the sun as a body, which we call Anyanwu, and its aura, which we call Abala, which are its rays, and the effect which radiates from it in the form of light, radiation, and heat. Mo is the self-observer, or an aura that emanates from all things. Both Maru and Mo have equal effect on who you will be, your thoughts and your wisdom, like a left and a right hand, rather than a person and its shadow. The heat felt from a fire, or the cool felt from a block of ice, are its Mo, and thus Mo is the self that emanates from self, spreading one's essential nature into the atmosphere, and having effect on all things within you and around you. I've done a video explaining the science of Mo, so if you're interested, I have a link below. Because infants come from Alam Mo, or the world of Mo, a child is said to be more in tune with Mo and the world of Mo than the world of Mad, or the world of people. And because of this, the first thing a parent will look to train in an infant is their Mo. This is done by way of ritual, as Mo is more receptive to communication through ritual, symbol, and pattern than direct communication as we would see it in Alam Madu. Once born, parents will wait for a period of 8 days, or 2 market weeks. If the child does not pass away in this time, they have shown interest in becoming a part of Alam Madu. At this point, the umbilical cord of the child is buried with a seed in a ceremony, as this is believed to officiate a child's citizenship in their community and in the world of the living. And on this same 8th day, a child's name is bestowed upon them in a naming ceremony. And while the chi determines destiny, the name of an individual will calibrate their spirit towards taking on a certain nature. And therefore, naming is seen as a means of pulling characteristics that are favorable or a destiny that is favorable, as each name has a resonance that calibrates an individual's mo to sync to its nature, which is expressed in the proverb, or whatever name one calls their chi is the name it will answer. For young men, the ceremony of Ibiugu, or circumcision, is done on the 8th day. In the past, the ceremony was also done for women on the 8th day, though in some communities, it is done immediately after their first period. Now, I should caution that this is the past, as female circumcision has been phased out within the last 2 generations. But I include these ceremonies as education in the sense that for our ancestors, they stood as means of calibrating more towards a particular path and a character conducive of good living and righteousness within the community. It is believed that a child who does not undergo these ceremonies is susceptible to negative influence and will ultimately have a weaker constitution of character due to having an untrained or uninitiated mo. After the naming ceremony, a child's uluchi, or childhood altar, is built. And uluchi is an altar dedicated to a child's destiny and their chi. The uluchi is used not only to show a child how to hold ancestral communion, but how to care for a sacred space and familiarize them with the process of communicating with their chi. The child's uluchi is also where parents will hold prayers on the child's behalf in case the child is sick or is set to embark on a great endeavor, which I'll explain shortly. At any point of a child's life after the 8th day, typically before the age of 3, but sometimes well after, a child will go through a ceremony known as Imam Mo. Imam Mo is an introduction to a specific socio-spiritual order in the community, often one that the parent is a member of, or one that is of particular importance in the community, such as a dominant masquerade society. In some communities, specifically the Oru communities, a blessing by the stream and an introduction to the spirit of the river may be a part of this process. And in most communities, especially for the rich, the child may undergo an introduction to the dominant title societies of the community, such as Nze, Okonko, Ozo, Omabe, and Ekpe. Each introduction comes with a specific set of privileges it opens up for the child. And knowing how information is passed down in ancestral society, this provides a wider opportunity for the child within the community for advancement, belonging, and learning. An introduction for a child into the Nze society, for example, makes them an Obere Nze and eases the process by which they can earn the title later in life, while allowing the child to enjoy certain privileges in the meanwhile. My own father did an introduction for us, me and my siblings, into the OU society. So if you want me to cover OU in a video, let me know in the comments. But one of the privileges I get as someone who did Imam Mo within OU is that I'm able to watch the OU that comes out at night, which is only reserved for members and titled men. And that if I achieve great things in my life, that this OU that comes out at night will come to my house and congratulate me and celebrate with me and so forth. But I'm not a full-fledged member, though I'll look into it when I go back. Beyond the training of a child on a spiritual level, practical learning is done in a multitude of ways, which are all linked by the age grade system. The age grade system is a system of categorizing children in generational groups, which will go through the major milestones of life together and be introduced to bodies of knowledge as a collective. While it varies by community, often age grades are formed for children born within a 3-year period of each other, as they are considered ula, or peers. Age grades or age sets are given names, and as they grow, they form unions of mutual assistance for their members. Within the age grade system, members are able to raise money for each other to start businesses, and members are also able to lend or loan within the age grade system and represent the collective interest of the generation in the community government, thereby checking the powers of elders over them. The age grades also exist as a measure of achievement, as one is often considered a success or failure based on how they measure up to the achievers within their age grade. Each grade is self-governing, holding a great level of sovereignty over its members and independence from the community. As a collective, they elect leaders who will be spokesperson for the grade and lead in organizing the age grade and activities, as well as collecting dues from members that will go into paying for healthcare, sponsoring travel among members, and helping less economically advantaged members with major expenses. But most often, especially for the younger age grades, dues are collected for the organizing of parties and feasts. As the age grade grows older into adulthood, they may collectively organize to sponsor community projects, such as the building of schools, roads, and hospitals in contemporary times, or as general economic support for members, which offer benefits after the birth of children, or in covering expensive endeavors such as funerals. Age grades also perform ikbe, or the holding of trials among members, if disputes arise, as well as policing the conduct and behavior of age grade members, as age grades can be punished or judged collectively if good or bad behavior is prevalent within an age grade at an unusual rate. An age grade shares a collective representation, as it is believed that each age grade has its own chi, or source spark, which gives a generation a collective destiny and nature, and therefore the general well-being or conduct of a single age grade reflects on the individual. Each set of ula will pass through various levels of attainment as they grow older, and each level will come with specific lessons and roles within the community related to history, civil conduct, martial studies such as archery, gunmanship, weapon making, wrestling, martial arts, or battle tactics. The different levels will also come with different levels of learning as far as economics and spiritual activities within a community, so that every 3 years, a new set of responsibilities and lessons are unraveled to a set of children, which will orient them in all of the activities of the community by the time they are adults, and teach them civics from the perspective of an individual with an ownership stake in their community. Each age grade will learn lessons in music, math, ceremony, the reading of nature, such as the moons, farming, skills acquisition, which I'll cover shortly, history, and natural sciences specific to their grade. And with the attainment of each level, a ceremony is performed to calibrate their more for the conduct necessary to show maturity and responsibility within each grade, and to further orient them to an understanding of their own chi, which will by nature pull their natural talents out from within. Before going forward, it's important to note that while the subject of the video, education, is going to incline me to focus on a certain type of knowledge transfer, in reality, learning was done by observing a child, seeing what the child is inclined towards, and then placing him in that role if necessary. While most children and young adults have set responsibilities and duties within a community, there's a great deal of knowledge transfer between elders or experts and children. The philosophy on learning in large part states that knowledge or ability comes from the inside out. So, for example, a young wife or a young girl may be sent to deliver a child because as a child they showed interest whenever it was being done, or they always wanted to make themselves present and see it being done. After this is noticed by elders or older people, it's assumed that the knowledge lives within the child, and the curiosity or interest is a sign from their chi that the child has the natural ability to do the job, without any of what we would today call training. Another example is the training of dibyas, where often a young initiate is told to isolate themselves in a forest for multiple days while fasting, and not to return until they learn how to communicate with the plants of the forest, with no instruction on how this is done. Or the other method, which I discuss in my dibya explain video, which I'll link below. And this is the idea that a dibya is to become a dibya by making nagon, or agon the mother, and okagon, agon the man, communicate within themselves. Again, without being told what this means or how this is possible. And often this is linked to the idea that if your chi destines you to do or be something, it'll come naturally from within. Very often this is taken a step further, and children are often trained based on who they reincarnate from and what they were doing in the previous life, especially if they did it with proficiency. So in many communities, dibyas are often dibyas because they were dibyas in previous lives, or have the gene within their family. And this idea is going to play a huge part in my final statement, so stay tuned to the end of the video. Community responsibility is also assigned to each age grade, so that by the time of adulthood, a child has been responsible for all the major facets of keeping a community whole and healthy. One age grade, for example, may be responsible for sanitation, while another polices the market. One may be responsible for clearing or trimming forest paths. One may be responsible for providing labor for building projects, while another forms the bulk or the whole of a community's military. I can do a full video on the age grade system and break down some of the different age grades and the ceremonies and beliefs that surround the system, so if you're interested, leave a comment below. Outside of the age grade system and the calibration of more through ritual, childhood features an organic approach to learning by way of lessons, games, competitions, and gatherings conducted by children or by elders for children. Children are taught lessons about the world, life, and how things work, often during full moons, but mostly at random. What is taught and how it is taught is often the choice of the elder who chooses to teach the children, or the older child who chooses to teach their younger clan members something that they have learned or know. But for the children themselves, this approach to teaching often resembles play. During full moons, but again whenever the elder chooses, children can be gathered and taught the order of the 4 market days, how denominations of currency work in the traditional system, their family and clan history through legend and performance, or logic by hosting competitions for the interpretation of proverbs and riddles. Language skills are also emphasized. In the world of our ancestors, one's ability to communicate was marked as the highest form of intelligence, and communication itself is not seen as articulate if it does not involve the use of proverbs. The role of proverbs in speech for Igbo people is one of high interest, which I personally believe is linked to the democratic nature of the society. In democracy, there is pressure to speak diplomatically, to get your point across as clearly and efficiently as possible, without breaking a chord with the listener or a contingent of diverse interests. For that reason, the ability to link your points to truth that make themselves evident in nature or everyday life, or in the common understanding of a people that both the speaker and listener are familiar with, is a great way to get this done. So, for example, if there's a meeting of Umunna or the Men's Community Congress, and there's a possibility of war, but you don't want to stoke feelings by saying directly that a community should arm itself, you may choose to say, Mbe shi na oji ihe egwu na-aga ije, maka na o nwere ike ịfụ ndị egwu n'ụzọ ya. Or Mbe the tortoise says that I carry my instruments with me when I travel, because I might meet musicians on the road. Many Ilu or Igbo proverbs owe their communicative value to the backdrop by which they come from. Egwu Ọnwa, or tales by moonlight, are stories told to children at this phase of their development, under moonlight by elders, or community storytellers. In the community of Abam, the tradition of Ogbara Nkwo is a gathering of children at the home of the oldest person in the community on the Nkwo market day. At these gatherings, children will hear historical narratives, learn songs and dances that accompany them, or carry moral lessons, hear long-form epic stories, or shorter moral tales, which the elder would then quiz the children to tell them the lesson of the story. Children will also hear moral poetry, known as mbem, which is also used as a form of communication by masquerades to teach and preserve ancestral lessons and perspectives on ethics and social matters. Theater is also performed at these gatherings, where legendary events or even contemporary happenings are reenacted and often mocked satirically. And very often, children will be challenged to craft their own stories and arrange their own plays for the entertainment of the elder and audience of their peers. And on days other than Nkwo, these gatherings are done in the obi of the father for each family. Egwu Ọnwa, or Tales by Moonlight, often features songs that are nonsensical and at times filled with tongue twisters to improve a child's rhetorical abilities. Tongue twister competitions between children are also performed under moonlight. And outside of this, Egwu Ọnwa features a wide range of stories featuring talking animals, and less often people who interact with them, serving as cautionary or explanatory tales. One popular story is the epic of Ojadili, a great wrestler who defeated everyone in Alam Mado. So out of boredom and arrogance, he decided to enter Alam Mo to wrestle with the spirits, or in some versions of his tale, to wrestle against his own chi. There's also the story of Eringa, a powerful superwoman wrestler who could not be defeated by any man, and thus she declared it's only her husband who will be able to pin her. Or the story of the girl in the skull, which I shared in my Onwai Explained video, so I'll include a link to that story below. Children are also taught the language of the Ekwe and the Ogene, both of which are in the class of talking percussions, as the tonality of the Igbo language can be mimicked by playing it, and thus used by an adept player to send messages long distance to an adept listener, as an early form of telephone communication. As children approach puberty, teaching loses its loose informal nature and becomes more structured, as children have the option of joining masquerade societies and apprenticeship programs, such as Igba Odibo. In masquerade societies such as Ikbe, children may learn the hand sign and written language known as Insibiri, a system of hand signs and written iconographs that often derive meaning from plays and rituals of the Ikbe society. For the Ikbe society, ritual theater was a means of entertaining members, spreading messages, and preserving rituals and information in a coded format to be shared amongst members. Between the ages of 11 and 13, the age grade graduates into young adulthood, and at this age, the tradition of Igbo Odibo begins. In this tradition, a young person will become an apprentice of a successful relative or a member of their clan or town, learning the trade that made that person successful, often following them to other parts of the world, where they'll engage in the craft activity. For young girls, service in the home of successful family members was key among the routes of Igbodibo. Odibo. A young girl will serve the family in running errands, doing chores, and caring for the home, as well as small children. In many communities, after a girl's ninth period, a ceremony is performed before her uluchi, or childhood shrine, for the purpose of her greeting her chi. In this ceremony, she'll take umune leaves and fill them with water, pouring it on her uluchi and saying, "My chi, wash your hands and eat," before sacrificing a hen to the altar. After that point, the matriarch, or the oldest woman in the family, will pray for her success. And after the prayer, she'll pour water on all the altars and shrines that represent her mother and female ancestors throughout the community. She will then cook the sacrificed chicken and prepare a meal to be shared by members of her age grade. At this point, she's considered ready to learn about womanhood. Her elders will begin teaching her the inner workings of what it means to be a woman, as well as how to be a wife and a mother, and lessons that fall in the realm of Almumu. Almumu is an individual's procreative and creative energy. This force is one's ability to bring a child or ideas and desires into reality. It is the force of fertility, both in the literal and abstract, for all people, but is most specifically a woman's seat of power, as the Ikenga is the seat of a man's power. I have a video on Almumu, and I've added the link below if you're interested in learning more. Now that the young girl's Almumu has awakened, she can now take part in community projects. One such is the making of an Mbari house, a home dedicated to the earth to celebrate the coming of good years. If the women in a community feel that a year was particularly good or fruitful, they'll build an Mbari house to house the spirit that brought the goodness and plenty into the community. This collective effort sees the women in the community decorating the house with art in forms such as uli and building figurines that represent the events of the year and spirits from mythology or within a community's pantheon of venerated forces. In communities such as Afipo, young women can become initiated into a circle of women who create ukarekbe. Ukarekbe is a ritually activated cloth rich with motifs from cosmology and insibidi worn specifically by members of the Ekbe society, which spans from the Afipo region into modern-day Cameroon. For a young girl in the village of Akwete, the art of Akwete is a specialty that is learned through the Igbo Odibo system, where a young girl can become an apprentice of an elder weaver, and thus learn the closely guarded secrets of how to produce and market the luxury fabric that is the specialty of her region. At the end of this apprenticeship, the young girl is then expected to form her own pattern using the Akwete style, and thereby own a form of copyrights to her own specific design, which she will then take into business and use to teach her own apprentice until that one gains their own independence. For women of the Enuani region, Akwa is also a coveted luxury fabric, whose methodology is passed down from woman to woman through family or apprenticeship ties. The craftwork behind Akwa is so specific to the women of the region that today it serves as a cultural attire, distinguishing the unique culture of the region as a whole. And for young men, Igbodibo begins after the age grade is initiated into manhood. Around the age of 13, a young boy will greet his uluchi, or childhood shrine. For a young man, the ceremony may involve going into the forest to find an alfal stick, which is a branch from the alfal plant that is often used to establish community boundaries or line shrines in sacred spaces. But most importantly, to craft the alfal, or the staff of authority, which is passed from father to son and allows an individual to be a representative of their ancestors and family. As is always the case whenever crafting an alfal, the branch the young man chooses must be one that fell on its own volition and can never be pulled from the tree itself. Upon finding the alfal stick, he will present it to the patriarch of his family, who's the most senior male, and most often the Ejialfa, or the alfal holder for the family, and thus its leader. The young man will also bring one male goat and a rooster for the ceremony. The patriarch will then give a blessing as the rooster and the goats are sacrificed. And in the example I was privileged to be introduced to, the patriarch will then hold the hands of the matriarch of the family and say to the boy, "Now we're giving you this alfal, an alfal that confers life in children, not an alfal that takes away life." And then both the matriarch and patriarch will say, "May Igwe stand with you." Now it is important to note that rituals for conferring manhood in a community differ from community to community, and the example I'm presenting is just one of many. But once a boy is initiated into manhood, he can begin the process of Igbo Odibo. Every career path will differ, but for the sake of this video, we'll focus on apprenticeship in ironsmithing. Ironworking technology and methodology were closely guarded secrets for the communities that held them. To assure protection of their intellectual property, the craft was regulated and protected by secret societies. In the Nsukka region, the Omabe Masquerade Society held that function and was constructed as a craft union for ironsmiths. In order for anybody to learn the craft, they must first join Omabe, and once in the organization, the individual is ritually bonded to protecting the secrets and upholding the ethics of the society and the code of conduct around the craft, as well as rules of engagement with customers and other members. These societies throughout Igbo land are held together by the veneration and honoring of the ancestor who brought the craft to the people, or the spirit force that regulates the art and protects its practitioners. In the ironsmithing community of Nkwo, the science was introduced by Ogadazu. Ogadazu was an ancestor brought by Chukwu to the Nkwo people when the community was founded. Ogadazu was an ironsmith, and for his mission, Chukwu instructed Ogadazu to any son of Nkwo he finds, which makes him the patron ancestor of smithing for the Nkwo people. When a boy is ready for Ibo Odibo, upon getting permission from his parents, he can initiate into the society of smiths in his community. Once initiated, the boy swears allegiance to the patron ancestor, or the spirit of the craft for his people. In the smithing community of Awka, before beginning his apprenticeship, the boy's family will be compensated with a farewell celebration. His Uluchi will receive a sacrifice from the boy and his parents, who will ask his chief to protect their son wherever the craft takes him. The boy, often selected after an assessment of character, will then follow his master to the Arushi of the patron ancestor, where another sacrifice is made. In making this sacrifice, the teacher will assure that the Mo, or spirit force, of the ancestor will look after the boy. At this point, the boy will then swear to keep the secrets of the craft and to keep knowledge of ironsmithing from the hands of foreigners or non-Aka people, non-initiates and women, and to be obedient to his master. In the ancestral era, smiths from Aka traveled great distances, going far north into Ida or Igala land today, east into the Cameroons and Cross River region, south into Ija land, and west into Benin and Yoruba land. Upon reaching their host community, the Aka men will give a tribute to the leader or leadership of the community to assure the protection of their Ezije, or good road, or trade routes. I have a very interesting account of a civil war that erupted in Aka because an Ezije was closed. Because on top of being expert smiths, Aka people were also expert doctors in the ancestral era, or surgeons. And while performing a surgery, one of them botched it and ended up killing an Ija woman, and a civil war to break out in Aka because of the incident. It's a very interesting story, and I'll probably share it soon. If you want to hear it sooner rather than later, comment below. In the beginning of his apprenticeship, the student will not be allowed to work the furnace nor touch the tools of the master until they've proven their obedience and ability to work hard. They'll be tasked with performing osafia, the practice of taking finished products from the shop and walking through the market or town, looking for customers to sell them to. Once in the new community, and after proving themselves worthy of learning more, the apprentice will learn 3 forms of ironsmithing, often depending on the specialty of the master. The first form is uzuike, or energy smithing, the production of everyday items that require a great deal of energy to produce, such as staves, hose, gongs, and hatchets. This is the first form of smithing taught to young people, for the fact that it requires the most strength and energy, the least amount of precision and patience. The second form is uzunlo, which involves more patient and intricate smithing, and at this level, individuals will be smithing gun parts and ritual items. And then finally, uzuona, which involves the smithing of metals such as brass and bronze, and is the most intricate, detailed level of smithing and learning. At this level, individuals will learn how to make high-value items such as jewelry. Towards the end of the apprenticeship, the master will allow the student to prepare his own works, and after a period of 4 to 7 years, the apprentice will gradually increase his liberties until he's able to sell his own products and creative work, or open a forge of his own. At the end of Igbodibo for Aka Smiths, the final test will be for the apprentice to create a display of his own works, lie them on a cloth, and invite all of the members of the guild to see them and celebrate the end of the apprenticeship with him. During this party, the host community is also invited, and the brothers in the guild will talk up his skills to the natives of the town they're in order to help him sell the wares he has placed on display. At this point, he'll return home with the money he made from the ceremony to celebrate with his family. His master will award him with an anvil, his own tools, and give him the money he needs to start his own forge. Often he'll be stationed in that host community, but it is common for him to then venture and find his own community in need of his services. Annually, all of the smiths of Awka will go home to Awka to pay tribute to Abu for a bountiful year. The students will pay tribute to their former master as well, and young boys from the community will have an opportunity to find a master of their own once they're initiated into manhood among the returning smiths. And that's it. In the beginning of the video, I had asked what the differences were between the education system we have today and the education system that was, or the education method that was practiced in the past. And if there's anything from the past that we can incorporate today to better what we're doing today. Now, before I give my answer, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to all of the patrons that make this channel possible. Chinwe Akumangokori, Anwulukao, Eric Mozuzu, Eze Chijoke Ojukwu, Ikenga Nation on all platforms, Isioma Orihu, Jess Akun, Jonathan Randall, Joshua Stepney, Sansu, Marsha Garrick, Adakun, Utah, Nia, Daria Nwokolo, Liz, Sydney Brown, Kayla Love, Chrisgina Benjamin, Lena West, Mansa, Nikki, Nina Nwafia, Neka Onyise, Ross Jones, Nenaya Amochi, Nwaka, Oluchi Omeoga, Red Clay Roundup, Sessa Salon, Jada Renee, Akachi Ikenga, Eddie Cooper, Akundayo, Zaire, JC, Negara A. Kamudu Art and Healing, Ojugo Amaka, Pamela, Kayla Brown, J Pi, Olaoma Opara, Tymel Jones, Kwasi Densu, Ikechukwu Obioha, Adora, Chief Chinyere, Njoku Eri, Ememe, Gretchen Segers, Ikoke, Michael, Olise Meka, Okapo, Sheila Blackburn, Sheena, Sharika Regina, Tony Walker, Renakara, Sonny Nwachukwu, Uche Abweze, Tochi A, Nkechi, Ngadioba, Michael, Jonas, Obodoefuna, James Gooden III, Odinaka, Sak Alexander, Joseph Young, The Homegirl Healer, NC Okeke, Diasporants on all platforms, the Igbo Cyber Shrine, and M. Bolds. The thing that I saw that was very different in my studies was the idea that learning comes from the inside out. And a lot of teaching, or at least teaching in this cultural context, there's the idea that once you decide you're something, you've already become that thing. Or that if you show interest in something, you're already qualified in handling it because it's something inside of you that is connecting you to that particular thing. Now, because I specifically wanted to show methods of knowledge transfer from teacher to student, this particular video didn't emphasize on that point. But some examples are Adibia being told to go into the forest and come out once they see themselves in a tree that they're made to stare at for multiple days. Or midwives being women that showed interest in midwifery, and from there happened to be proficient in doing it naturally. And some of the best examples of this philosophy come in the diaspora. If you look at the black musical traditions of the US and Caribbean and South America, be it jazz, rapping, blues, DJing, Nyabingi music, and so forth, it's hard to find a place where the practitioners have rehearsals or are taught what they do in a structured way, or what we would understand to be a structured way. And in all of these forms, the idea is that you're displaying something that's already inside of you, or the art form itself being a platform for you to bring out what is already within you, your own unique or natural expression that you don't necessarily learn from the outside. If you hear stories of people who rap, it's usually something like they gravitated towards it, then after a while they just started doing it. Typically the same with jazz music, especially in the early days of the genre. And even in composing the music, everybody adds what is natural to them to the mix until a cohesive medium is made. I was at an event in college and they were playing Nigerian music, and an Afghan girl that I knew pulled me to the side and asked me how to dance to it. And the only answer I can give is you just dance. But I remember that question made me realize that in a lot of cultures, you have to learn how to do the dance of the culture or how to dance in a specific way. Whereas in our own, it's assumed that it naturally comes out of you. And one of the ways to improve is not letting your own nerves or thoughts get in the way of that natural expression coming out. So taking this idea out of entertainment and applying it to things like medicine, science, architecture, and so forth would be a huge leap of faith based on the way we think today. But I personally think it's possible. I think we underestimate what's naturally inside. And back home, there are people who do full chiropractic work and invasive surgery, and that just happens to be their natural gift, the way some people can naturally sing or do the splits. And I think we often take a lot of the things that are inside of us that express at a genius proficiency for granted. But I think everybody has that thing that they don't need to be taught, as it is a natural expression of their chi. And I don't say that to say that everyone should grab a knife and start cutting people because they decided overnight they were surgeons. I'm saying all of this to say that we often believe it's the program or the teacher or the materials that make learning and ability possible, when in reality, all of these things are tools or aids for pulling something out of you that's already there. A lot of the times we use the idea of I need to take one more course or read one more book to avoid doing, when in reality, the learning is revealed in the doing. Even worse, a lot of us have decided that there's multiple aspects of life that we're not smart or capable enough to do, which is particularly tragic when it's something that resonates with us deeply. So the idea of learning from the inside tells me not to be intimidated by so-called bodies of knowledge. not to think that I don't have what it takes, or I'm not ready or smart enough to do something that my chi is already pulling me towards. There's a proverb that says that when a blind man's chi sends him into battle, it's already accounted for his blindness, or that the things you're destined for, you're already prepared for. Everything you'll come to learn is already inside you, and there's nothing you can learn that's bigger than what's already within. Or as the ancestors say, Chika Dibia. This is Derek O'Farno with the Medicine Show. Again, thank you.